Hi, welcome to another lecture in oral and maxillofacial surgery. So today we are going to start a new topic, that is infections. We have three lectures in this series. The first one will be a introductory lecture for odontogenic infections. The second one is on space infections, and the third is about osteomyelitis and osteoradionecrosis. So this is just an introduction. Okay, so just to know about what an infection is, how it spreads, the microbiology behind the cause of infection, and the various stages of orofacial infections like abscess and cellulitis, and how to diagnose, how are the investigations, and the various treatment modalities available. Okay, both surgical as well as conservative management. So that's all we are going to discuss during this lecture, just the basic concepts about odontogenic infections. So before going into the lecture, I want you to have a look at all these pictures. These are various patients who have different kinds of odontogenic infections. You can see the manifestations, and it looks like it's varied. Uh, you might even mistake it for a carcinomatous lesion. It can look so dreadful, and sometimes it might look like a maxillofacial trauma when you look at all those gross edema and swellings. But basically, these are all just infections and the various manifestation of orofacial infections. So, coming to the learning outcomes, at the end of this topic, you are expected to recognize the clinical features typical of infection of the these odontogenic infections, and the relationship of pain, swelling, trismus, etc. And you should be able to discuss the clinical patterns of spreading infection, abscess formation, and bone infection. And you should also plan or appropriate investigations, and you should be able to predict the likely behavior of an infection depending upon its clinical signs and symptoms, and select the cases requiring surgical treatment like incision and drainage, and describe how this would be performed. And also you should also know about the antimicrobial chemotherapy, that is antibiotics therapy, and you should be able to draft a regime. So first, let's know a bit about the applied anatomy involved in infection. So, odontogenic infection, as the name implies, it is an infection which arises from the tooth, okay, from the teeth. So, when a tooth is infected, it can be due to dental caries, or when a tooth is subjected to trauma, it can get traumatized, inflammation and infection can set in. And when the tooth is infected, the infection from the tooth can spread to various other parts of the oral cavity, and sometimes to certain extraoral structures too. So what are the various pathways through which infection from a tooth can spread? Okay, check the first picture. So it can take the maxillary molar, for instance. When a maxillary molar is infected, the infection from that tooth can spread laterally in two ways. Okay, so here there is a black patch, that is the buccinator muscle. If the infection spreads below the attachment of the buccinator muscle, it will manifest as an vestibular abscess. You will see a bulge in the vestibule. So that is called as a vestibular abscess. If the infection spreads above the attachment of the buccinator muscle, it can go into the buccal space, and the infection also can spread superiorly into the maxillary sinus, and it can spread mesially into the palate, and it will be seen as a palatal abscess. Coming to the mandibular teeth, if the infection spreads laterally, again the buccinator muscle plays an important role in the spread of the infection. If it is above the buccinator attachment, it is seen as a vestibular abscess. If it is below the attachment of the buccinator muscle, it is seen as the buccal space infection. And when it spreads medially, the myloid muscle plays an important role here. If the infection is above the myloid muscle, it is seen as a sublingual space infection. If it is above below the attachment of the myloid muscle, it is seen as a submandibular space infection. So now you can notice that the muscle attachments that can play a very important role in the spread of infection. And infection always the path of infection is always through the least resistant path. Okay, so It can go along the muscle attachment and it can go into the tissue spaces and manifest as a cellulitis or an abscess. So coming to the microorganisms causing odontogenic infections, if you take the oral cavity, there is a whole range of microorganisms. Okay, it involves both aerobic and anaerobic, and just a list of microorganisms that take part in the odontogenic infection process. And to be more specific about the bacteriology, odontogenic infections are caused by a mixed flora, means it consists of both aerobic and anaerobic organisms. When you take aerobic organisms, you have Streptococcus species like Viridians, hemolytic Streptococci, etc. You have Staphylococcus species and also other species like Dipteroids, Neisseria, Klebsiella, Haemophilus, etc. These are all aerobic organisms. Coming to anaerobic organisms, you have the bacteroids, Peptostreptococcus, Fusobacterium and Lactobacillus. So now we come to the most important part of infection, that is how an infection progresses. Okay, so first is the inoculation stage, where the microorganism establishes itself into one particular area and it keeps multiplying. For example, say the Streptococcus species, that is the most commonly seen microorganism in any orofacial infection. And so when Streptococcus species establishes itself, it multiplies, it secretes an enzyme called as hyaluronidase. Now, what does this hyaluronidase do? There is something called as a matrix substance which holds the cells together. It is called as hyaluronidine. Hyaluronidine is nothing but the matrix substance which is like more or less like a cement holding two bricks. So the cells are held together by hyaluronidine. Now this hyaluronidine is destroyed by the enzyme hyaluronidase. So once the hyaluronidine is destroyed, the integrity in the cellular architecture is lost, which results in inflammation of the tissue spaces, which is called as cellulitis. Basically, it is just an inflammation. So when there is cellulitis, there will be decrease in the pH, means it gets more acidic, that region, and also there will be a decrease in the oxygen saturation, a localized decrease in the oxygen saturation. When there is decrease in the oxygen saturation, the anaerobes enter that area. So decrease in oxygen saturation leads to invasion of anaerobes. Now once anaerobes are in the scene, they secrete a enzyme called as collagenase. As the name implies, collagenase will destroy collagen, which leads to liquefaction necrosis, resulting in dead tissues and dead WBCs, resulting in formation of pus. A collection of pus is called as an abscess. So this is how a infection progresses. So first cellulitis sets in, and following that, because of the action of collagenase and liquefaction necrosis, abscess is formed. So don't be confused. First comes cellulitis followed by abscess. So these are the various stages of odontogenic infection. The first one, as I said earlier, is the inoculation stage. Inoculation stage is where there is edema and it happens during the first 3 days. From the inoculation stage, it normally lasts for 3 days, and followed by cellulitis stage, which stays for at least 5 days. And during cellulitis, the inflammation is diffuse. After cellulitis comes the abscess stage, which can last up to 10 days. And here the diffused phenomenon is lost. Now the inflammation is confined to a localized area and it is filled with pus. So this is the abscess stage. It is localized and it can last up to 10 days. This is where you go for the treatment. Either you can go for a surgical drainage where you do a incision and drain the pus out, or sometimes even with the simple antibiotic therapy, the infection can get resolved. So this is called as a resolution stage, maybe due to the surgical drainage or due to the antibiotic therapy, or sometimes combined. Both surgical drainage as well as antibiotic therapy can lead to the resolution stage where healing and repair occurs. So these are the various features of cellulitis and abscess. Like I said earlier, the duration for cellulitis around 7 days and abscess is over 5 days. And pain will be severe and generalized in cellulitis, whereas it is moderate and it is localized. of course can be moderate to severe, but the pain is localized. The patient will be able to locate the pain. And the size, since it is diffuse, cellulitis spreads over a large area, it is large. Whereas abscess is more confined and it is localized, it is small. As I said earlier, cellulitis is diffuse and abscess is more circumscribed. And coming to the consistency, when you palpate, you will find the cellulitis to be hard and exquisitely tender, whereas abscess will be fluctuant because it is filled with pus. And the cellulitis appears red, whereas in the abscess only the peripheral part appears red. The skin quality in cellulitis is thick, whereas the abscess it is centrally undermined and shiny. The cellulitis, the surface temperature is hot, abscess is moderately hot. The loss of function will be severe in cellulitis, it will be moderately severe in abscess. And the most important part, the tissue fluid, when you make an incision in an area where there is cellulitis, you will get a serosanguinous fluid with flecks of pus. Serosanguinous means a watery fluid laced with blood, serum combined with blood. So it's kind of, it does not exactly blood, it's quite watery, but it will appear pale red in color. This is called as serosanguinous fluid. And there will be sometimes little bit of pus here and there. So when you make an incision in a cellulitis, you won't get any frank pus, just serosanguinous fluid with flecks of pus. Whereas in an abscess, when you make an incision and drain it, there will be frank pus. And levels of malaise is severe in cellulitis, moderate to severe in abscess, and the degree of seriousness also is severe in cellulitis, moderate to severe. And the predominant bacteria in cellulitis is mixed, whereas in abscess it is anaerobic. Because of the action of the anaerobic organisms, the collagenase enzyme is secreted and there is a liquefaction necrosis. So you will find predominantly anaerobic organisms in a abscess. Means when you send a pus for culture, most of the time you will find it is predominantly occupied by anaerobic bacteria. So how does an infection spread? It can spread by direct continuity via the lymphaticus or via the bloodstream. And the factors affecting the spread, the type and virulence of the organisms, when you fail to drain an abscess, and the patient's health, if the patient is immunocompromised. So the effectiveness of the immune system plays a very important role in the spread of infection. And of course, the anatomical factors that influence the spread of infection, the site and source, the point of pus escape, the natural barrier to spread like muscles, bone, etc. And muscles always, they commonly play a vital role. So now we talk about some pathologic conditions that is seen in the oral cavity. The first is the acute alveolar abscess. It is manifested as the periapical abscess, pericoronal abscess, and periodontal abscess. I'm sure you are aware of all these terms, so I need not go into it. And the cause, when there is an inflamed pulp, the patient will have throbbing pain, which is provoked by heat, and it can be acute to chronic, and it's spread of infection. There is spread of infection to the periapex, and when there is infection at the apical region, the tooth appears raised, and the patient will be having tenderness to lateral pressure. When you percuss the tooth, the patient will have a complaint of pain and also while biting, and there will be pus accumulation in the marrow space, and the abscess will have a pyogenic membrane. And the treatment for this is incision and drainage, release the pus, or extract the tooth and release the pus. So management, like any other pathological condition, the first and foremost is the history taking: when, where, how, why, duration, etc., etc. The signs and symptoms will be dolor, the swelling, warmth, redness, trismus. And of course, when you physically examine the patient, you check for the vital signs, you palpate and check for the consistency or tenderness. And if it is the tooth, gonna go for an X-ray. Sometimes when there is an abscess, a long-standing abscess or a long-standing periapical infection, you can appreciate some amount of radiolucency in relation to the apex of the tooth. And always you should be able to differentiate between the abscess and cellulitis. You should be able to confirm in which stage the infection is, whether it is in the cellulitis stage or if it is in the abscess stage. So management part, IND, means incision and drainage. Normally this placed on the dependent part of the abscess. So I've got a few slides towards the end of this lecture which will tell you how to do an incision and drainage. Okay. So you do an incision and drain rate means you place an incision at the most dependent part of the abscess, drain the pus out, and using a sterile swab, you can take the pus and send it for culture and sensitivity. Okay, the sterile swab is also called as culture tip, or you can aspirate some pus in a sterile syringe and send it to the lab, microbiology lab or pathology lab for culture and sensitivity. Basically, what they do is they culture the pus. They find out what organism or which organism is predominantly present in that pus, and the sensitivity test is they try to find to which antibiotics that particular organism is sensitive, and also to which antibiotic the microorganism is resistant. So this will give you an idea about what antibiotics you are supposed to prescribe. Most of the time what we do is when we get a patient with an acute infection, I do IND, we take a swab, we send it to the lab, but we will start antibiotic therapy. It is called as empirical antibiotic therapy. We put the patient on a course of antibiotics just to stabilize his condition, and takes at least a week to get the culture and sensitivity report, and the sensitivity report will tell us what antibiotics that particular microorganism is sensitive to. If you have already prescribing that particular antibiotic, you don't need to worry. But if you are prescribing some other antibiotics, maybe we can change the antibiotic to this specific antibiotic to which the organism is sensitive. And at the same time, it will also, the sensitivity report will tell you to which antibiotic the organism is resistant. And by chance or in case you are prescribing that particular antibiotic, you can stop it. Okay, because it is not going to help you in any way. And once we do the drainage, we place a drain, Penrose drain or a rubber dam. Basically it is to facilitate the pus to come out. And what is the duration? How long are you supposed to leave a drain? Normally a drain is not supposed to stay for more than 24 to 48 hours, so we keep replacing the drain, and the drain should stay there till the pus drainage is complete. Only when the lesion is dry you are supposed to remove the drain. In case there is little bit of pus draining out, the drain needs to stay there till the drainage of pus is over. And the goals, of course, you have to remove the etiology. If you feel it is a tooth which is a causative factor, better get rid of the tooth. Okay, so that is the management. Coming to the indications for use of antibiotics, antibiotics is one drug which should not be um, used just like that. There should be a proper indication for the use of antibiotics, or else the organisms can develop resistance and this antibiotic might prove useless later in future. So what are the conditions or indications where you are supposed to prescribe antibiotics? When there is a rapidly progressive swelling and you are sure that it is due to a microorganism, and when there is diffuse swelling, compromised host defenses when immunocompromised patients, and when there is involvement of facial spaces, when there is severe pericornitis, and in cases of osteomyelitis, and situations in which use of antibiotics is not necessary. When there is a chronic well localized abscess, all you need to do is incision and drainage. And similarly, in minor vestibular abscess, a simple incision and drainage of the pus is more than adequate. You don't have to go in for antibiotics. And in cases of dry socket is basically an inflammatory condition. There are two different schools of thought. Some say some anaerobic microorganisms are involved in the formation of dry sockets, so antibiotics are necessary, and they prescribe metronidazole. But most of the textbooks say that it's just an inflammatory condition, so just a pure painkiller or an analgesic is more than adequate, a wound debridement, and something to promote the formation of granulation tissue, like a eugenol pack. This is the course of treatment advised by most of the oral surgeons. So let's say that dry socket is not an infectious condition, so you don't have to prescribe antibiotics. And mild pericornitis, again, you just need to irrigate that area with warm normal saline. Maybe if there is an offending tooth, upper molar which is impinging on the pericornal flap, traumatizing it, you can do a bit of grinding, or sometimes you can even go for extraction of that upper molar. So even in this case, antibiotics is not necessary, just symptomatic treatment is more than adequate. So the effective orally administered antibiotics useful for odontogenic infections are penicillin, erythromycin, clindamycin, ceftriaxone, metronidazole, and tetracycline. These are the most commonly used antibiotics for odontogenic infections. Okay, now we come to the drainage part. So okay, now this is Incision and drainage. This is also known as Hilton's method. Hilton. Hilton's method. Basically, the principle here is you are going to, there is a abscess. So all you need to do is make an incision, let the pus come out, drain out. Okay, so first thing is you should know what instrument we are going to use. We use two instruments. One is the BP blade, which we use to make the incision. Then there is something called as a sinus forceps, which looks somewhat similar to the artery forceps, which is used for dilating the abscess cavity so that it can facilitate the drainage of pus. So the BP blade, which we use for draining or making the incision, sorry, is blade number 11. Okay, it looks more or less like a dagger, a knife. So with this blade you make a stab incision. So first you need to select the point or the location where you are going to make this stab incision. They say that you should make the stab incision at the most dependent part of the abscess. What do you mean by the most dependent part of the abscess? That is where most of the pus is collected. So you make the stab incision, means you just push the blade into the abscess cavity and pull it out. You're not cutting it, you're just stabbing it. Once you have developed that stab, you made an incision now, and through that incision you introduce the sinus forceps. The sinus forceps should be used in such a way that you don't cause any damage to any vital structures which are within that area. So how are you going to use the sinus forceps? The sinus forceps should be pushed into the abscess cavity with its beaks closed. Then you open the beak. When the sinus forceps is inside the abscess cavity, you open the beak. The purpose of opening the beak is there will be several compartments within the abscess known as loculi. So this opening of the beaks will enable the breaking of these loculi, and pus which is collected in those various loculi will come gushing out. And when you bring the sinus forceps out, you're not supposed to close the beaks. You open the beak and you bring the instrument out with the beaks open, because if you close the beak when the instrument is within the abscess cavity, and if there are any vital structures like a vessel or a nerve, you will grab that structure and you will be pulling it out along with the instrument. So to avoid this, you open the beak and you bring the instrument with the beaks open. After draining the so that's where you can see the beaks are held open. You're not supposed to close the beak. Okay, after draining the pus, you're supposed to place a drain. It can be a corrugated drain or a rubber dam or a Penrose drain. So many drains are available. So an appropriate length of drain is placed inside the abscess cavity, and a part of it should be projecting out, which will facilitate the drainage of the pus. And as I said earlier, a drain should be left for at least 24 to 48 hours. After that, if there is no pus draining out, the drain can be removed. If there is still some pus draining out, the drain should be replaced. A fresh drain has to be placed. After removing the drain, normally we don't suture up the stab incision. We just leave it open. It granulates and heals by itself by secondary intention. So that is the entire process of an abscess drainage. So whenever you see a abscess, a bulge, you know that it is soft and fluctuant filled with pus. Don't hesitate, don't even be scared to pick the blade up. Make a stab incision, drain the pus out, and most of the time that will be more than sufficient. You don't have to go for any antibiotic therapy. And if there is any offending tooth adjacent to it, a grossly decayed tooth, and you're sure that the infection is arising from that particular source, get rid of the tooth, extract it out. That means you're removing the source of infection and the patient will recover fast. So yeah, that's where you can see there they have placed the drain. Maybe for this tooth you can consult with an endodontist, see if endodontic treatment will be sufficient to resolve the periapical infection. So that's a Penrose drain in place to provide drainage for a vestibular abscess. Alright, that brings us to the end of this topic. So the next lecture will be on space infection, facial space infections. And if you have any doubt with this particular topic, kindly post your questions in the e-portal. Okay, thank you very much.